Good afternoon. Welcome to our final talk in Theatre 1 here at the Museum and Heritage Show. I'm Jamie McCall. I've been the chair today for the talks. I work for PLB and we're one of the show sponsors. We're involved in heritage and very keen on helping get that message out to everybody. So if you have any feedback about the talks at all, the Museum and Heritage are really keen if you can email info@museumandheritage.com. We'll have some time for questions at the end. I'll pass this mic round so you can ask whatever you would like. And please remember that the sessions are being recorded, so you'll get a link later on after the show that you can see what you're seeing today. So the talk is called Roots and Branches, Museums Responding to the Climate Crisis. This is the Museum Development London team, and we have Yvette Shepherd, the Museum Development Officer of Organisational Health, and Lauren Speed, the Museum Development Officer of Workforce. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We're here to talk to you about a really exciting project called Roots and Branches, which was launched to coincide with COP in November last year. So I'm going to talk about the background stuff, and then I'm going to hand over to Lauren, who's going to guide you through the intricacies of the carbon literacy training and toolkit that we have on offer. So just to frame this, and I'm going to have to put my specs on, sorry about this. Just to frame this a little, this project is run as a collaborative project through Museum Development England. Museum Development England, I'm hoping that you're aware of this, but just in case there may be some people who don't know about this, there are 9 museum development programs in England and in its current format, and we're there to support accredited museums and those working towards accreditation, those that are not nationals or MPOs or in receipt of government funds of any kind. So we support those museums through grants and training and advice. And we are part of a sort of wider devolved MD UK network, but this project is MD England based. So just to give you a bit of background to how the project came about. Well, carbon literacy training for museums first began in the Northwest in 2016, and it's now become a national project. Now, the background to this is that way back in the old days, for those of us who've been there a long time, we did offer some green programs. All the different museum development regions offered their own form of green program. And for instance, in London, we ran a program that linked museums to the green tourism certification system, and we offered them small grants to do all kinds of different things. Some of them were really imaginative projects that involved things like creating green spaces, dipping ponds, apothecary gardens, that kind of thing. But one of the things we found was a bit of a problem with them was that those projects generally focused on one member of staff who had a real enthusiasm for trying to promote sustainable ways of working. And as soon as that person left, the whole impetus of the project left with them. So our colleagues in Museum Development Northwest had experienced exactly the same problem, and they came across the carbon literacy scheme, partly because Manchester made a really big effort to make sure that most staff working for the local authority were trained in carbon literacy at that time. So they decided to pilot working with the carbon literacy program to embed training within organisations. And the idea of this program is that everyone within the organisation has the opportunity to participate in training, and it this really helps to get around that issue of somebody, you know, instigating a really exciting project and then moving on. So the idea is that everyone within the organisation will be involved and committed to bringing about change. So the strapline is, sustainability isn't in anyone's job title, but it is in everyone's role. And it's really useful because everyone's got their own sphere of influence. So every museum's different and has its own challenges. Carbon literacy doesn't give all the answers, but what it does do is it acts as a really good baseline to provide everyone with really good knowledge and to encourage them to embed activities within the whole team. So these are the organisations that are involved in the project. It is a partnership. It's a partnership between the charity, the Carbon Literacy Project, between Manchester Museum, Museum Development England, and of course very much led for us by Museum Development Northwest. And last year, as I mentioned earlier, the Roots and Branches project was funded by generous funding from the Arts Council England's National Lottery Heritage Funds project. So in common with all the other regions, we had our own activity on the 1st of November to coincide with the launch of the Roots and Branches project and the launch of the COP26 conference in Glasgow. And we had a great event, didn't we, with Carol Destre, who was the Climate and Ecological Coordinator at the Horniman Museum, came along. We had Libby Finney, our very own Regional Collection Care Development Officer, and we had Catherine McAlpine, who's the Director of the Brunel Museum. And they came along, and we had a really good talk from each of them and a Q&A to kick off our participation in the Roots and Branches project. So just to explain a little about that title, Roots and Branches. So the roots are very much, for this project, are very much going to be embedded in Manchester Museum. Manchester Museum is committed to acting as a host for a cultural environment action co-working hub. That's quite a long mouthful, but hopefully it will operate rather more smoothly than the title. The branches, that's the regional museum development teams, and you guys in museums. The idea is that those branches will be the energy driving this project and driving the tree forward. I should have said as well that to launch the project there was a big social media campaign, and there's just a little picture on the slide there of the Brunel Museum. Interestingly, that rooftop garden is one that we did fund many, many years ago. It's an apothecary garden, and you can go there for wonderful midnight cocktails. But the Brunel Museum's sustainability statement was launched around that time as well. And if we have time, we might be able to say a little more about that later. So, as mentioned, the roots are embedded in Manchester Museum. We're really pleased that Hannah Hartley has been appointed now as an environmental action manager for Manchester Museum, and she's going to work to sort of really embed sustainability across Manchester Museum, but also to get this hub off the ground. And the hub is going to really bring together people from different areas of interest: museum staff, educators, environmentalists, artists, activists, researchers, third sector organisations and students. And the idea is that they will promote conversations about environmental action and social justice. So that's really something to look forward to. She's only just been appointed, so that work will be unfolding over the coming year. perhaps of more significance to us in Museum Development London is our role as part of the branches of the project. So a carbon literacy toolkit has already been developed, and that is in place, and it's a sector-specific, very hard to say those one after another, sector-specific toolkit for museums. And it's been designed to build capacity, skills and knowledge to reduce carbon and take climate action. So it's delivered by people who understand the museums sector. Each of the 9 English regions are participating in this project. In London, we launched our first training in March, and we were really pleased to be able to do that and to get our first cohort of 12 London museums trained up, and we're really pleased that some of that training they are now rolling out within their organisations. So they're taking it back and they're rolling it out within their organisations. And also, a key appointment as part of this programme was the appointment of Alison Criddle, who is the Museum Carbon Literacy Officer. She is based at Museum Development Northwest at Manchester Museum, and she's a really integral part of this project. And I'm delighted to say as well that earlier today, due to the networking here, I met Lorraine Finch, who has been appointed as a freelance consultant to carry out research and inform plans for the next phase of training and to make recommendations for development of content and for deep dive webinar programme to look at specific issues of interest. Oh, and Lorraine's book is on sale today in stand M1. So just a little plug for her there. So just to conclude my little section here, we're really pleased that across England, so far, 30 of us, 30 people in total, including Museum Development England staff like myself and Lauren, have been trained up to deliver carbon literacy training. So far we've got 95 people from 62 organisations have completed their course and have their certificates, which is really exciting when you get your certificate. And we have, as I said, 12 people took part in our London-based training, and we're really excited to know that they are now rolling that out within their own museums. There will be a programme, a separate programme, if any of you are from national museums, which Alison Criddle will coordinate. And there's all kinds of awareness-raising activities. We very much see this as part of a campaign to really galvanise activity within the sector and to try to encourage everyone to take a role. So I'm going to hand over to Lauren, who's going to tell you about the details of the toolkit and the training.
Okay, thanks Yvette. So I'm just going to do a kind of deep dive into what's actually involved in the training programme and the toolkit that's available. So I thought I'd start with what actually is carbon literacy, because it's kind of a fancy term. This is the definition that the Carbon Literacy Project give, and essentially it's both an awareness of the issues around carbon dioxide emissions, but also, crucially, the ability and motivation to do something about it. And also to bring others along with you on the journey. And this is done, as Yvette said, through the training programme and the carbon literacy certification. And if you want to know a bit more about that, you can check out the carbon literacy website, which I've popped up there. So, as Yvette said, the carbon literacy training has been developed on a sector-by-sector basis. So it includes training developed for public services such as local authorities, healthcare, and as well as toolkits for private sector use, so rail and transport industries and that sort of thing. Through the Roots and Branches project, a toolkit specifically for museums has been developed, and it was launched earlier this year. Museum Development London rolled out our first training programme online in March this year. And as Yvette said, we were delighted to have 12 individuals completing the course in our first cohort. And we've got our next session is already planned as well. So why a toolkit for museums? So I just wait for the applause to finish. There's actually quite a lot of reasons why a toolkit is a valuable resource for the museum sector. First and foremost, there's no denying it, we are facing a climate crisis driven by greenhouse gas emissions, and museums have a significant carbon footprint. As with all sectors, there's a real need to act now to reduce carbon emissions to limit the impacts of climate change. And the toolkit is a powerful resource in this endeavour. What it does is it empowers your staff and provides them with the skills and confidence to take impactful carbon reduction action within your museum. Carbon literacy also speaks to the museum sector's role in society. So museums act as stewards of culture, nature, heritage, and of knowledge, and they sit as trusted organisations within their communities. They engage with millions of people every year, both in person and online, and ultimately they tell important stories about humans and our planet. And so museums are perfectly placed to engage with climate change and to empower communities to reduce their emissions. And again, this is where the toolkit comes in. It can give museum staff and volunteers the knowledge to tell the stories around climate change. And finally, climate action and environmental responsibility have become central values to both museum audiences and also to museum funders. Communities are overwhelmingly in favour of climate action, and museums have a responsibility as public institutions to act. As well as this, many museum funders have made environmental responsibility a core organisational value. So carbon literacy can actually help your museum to meet the expectations of both your audiences and also when you're going for funding. So how does it work? The first step is to join a carbon literacy training session and get certified. This involves around 7 hours of training, and this is usually spread over a couple of days, and it gives you the foundations to take carbon reduction action in your museum and to talk about climate change with your colleagues and audiences. Then, if you want to go on and deliver the training yourself, you'll need a copy of the toolkit, and you can also attend a Train the Trainer support session, so it's a bit of a mouthful, which I can highly recommend. What some prospective trainers also do is they find it useful to come and shadow the delivery of a course, and myself and Yvette are very happy for people to shadow one of our sessions. The toolkit itself gives you everything that you need to deliver the carbon literacy training within your organisation. So there's a detailed trainer manual which contains comprehensive instructions and explanations of all the training material. There's a ready-made slide deck which you can use to deliver the training with your organisation, and you can also adapt it to fit your kind of specific circumstances and projects you might be involved in. There's an interactive activity pack which can be used to enhance the learning experience of the activities within the course. And there's also a regularly updated list of resources which contain general advice, but also museum sector specific advice, and loads of links that you can use in your training and in your conversations about carbon literacy. There's also a Getting Started pack, which contains everything that you need to get your training off the ground. And finally, it contains what we call the action evidence forms, which is what the users will learn, the learners will use once the training's been delivered. And this is what the Carbon Literacy Project actually check before they certify your staff. But again, all of that is explained within the toolkit very comprehensively. By the end of a training session, trainees will understand the basic science of climate change and its impacts. They'll know how climate change affects museums and their audiences. They'll know how museums can tackle climate change. They'll have created specific actions to help reduce the carbon footprint of them and their museum. And they'll also think about strategies for influencing others to take action. It's quite flexible, so it's up to each organisation to determine how best to deliver the training in a way that suits them. Because the course is split into 4 modules, you can create a schedule that fits around your organisation. So, for example, you might choose to complete the training over 2 days, 3 days, on consecutive days, or a week apart. Basically, the toolkit contains detailed instructions and timings to help you do this. So, as an example, myself and Yvette, we did it over 2 days that were spread a week apart, just to give people that kind of time between to just digest everything, because there's quite a lot of information in the first module. So you can see the full course outline here, just to give you an idea of the kind of topics that are covered. When we ran our first course in March, we asked the delegates to prepare for the course by doing Module 1 at home as a self-led activity, and then we delivered Modules 2, 3 and 4 online via Zoom. But they're also working on an in-person version, aren't they, at the minute? So that will become available at some point. So they call them, the content that asks the learners to engage and interact is referred to as an activity, and this takes a variety of forms throughout the course, and you can see a couple of them up here. So you've got, as I mentioned, self-guided learning, which is essentially watching a pre-recorded video and a documentary, as well as activities such as identifying carbon-related objects within your home, and also calculating your own carbon footprint. We've also got group discovery, and that's essentially just to remember that it's not really a classroom, it's more of a space for sort of engaging people through various material and media. So it's all about encouraging dialogue rather than being a sort of didactic transfer of information. There's also loads and loads of sector case studies and scenarios. So the toolkit has been developed thanks to the insight and contributions of individuals and organisations within our own sector. So as a result, we've embedded many case studies from across the sector that celebrate and share initiatives that people are taking, that speak to the challenges that we're facing, and that also explore ways to face those challenges through a range of different scenarios. And then also there's breakout activities where you can sort of get into smaller groups and really hone in on specific themes and topics to really do a sort of deep dive on the subject. The overall idea is to enable learners to engage with the course and also with their peers in a range of different ways, ensuring that everybody plays an active role in the training. So we want people to be really engaged. The trainer manual outlines each activity, the delivery format and the timings. So basically all the hard work has been done for you. They've really put quite a lot of effort into putting the toolkit together. And you've also got an accompanying activity pack and resource document, which contains all the relevant course content and all the links to support learners to take the climate action. So it's really there to support you and your organisation through taking climate action and in delivering the training to help other people do the same. I'm just going to hand back to Yvette for the last bit.
Thanks. Okay, so this slide does reiterate a little bit of what we've said already, but I think it's worth saying again. Lauren and I are really pleased to be able to join you today, and we were really very pleased to be pushing forward carbon literacy training as part of Museum Development London's programme, because we think it's really, really important. It has to be addressed. And we do think that museums have a really important role to play in delivery of this kind of training. Museums do create their own emissions. You know, a lot of museums are in leaky buildings, all kinds of energy problems. It's imperative that museums sort of take control of some of the issues that are facing them. But we are uniquely placed. We're trusted by the public. We're influential in communities. We're part of communities, after all. So engaging with those communities and giving communities space to talk, space to come together and to express their own desires and activism is important. So what can we do? Well, you know, first of all, it's important that we embed activities across the whole structure and develop action plans that affect everyone. It is part of everyone's role, you know, and it is part of everybody's role to sort of be thinking about these issues and how we can address them as individuals as well as organisations as a whole. We're role models, so if we can start as organisations to display best practice, others can take up that shield and move forward with it. And we can shine a light on climate change through our exhibitions and our activities, and we can use our influence to advocate for better approaches to long-term sustainability. We can reimagine museums as central sites in tackling some of these very important issues. It's not an exhaustive list. I'm sure you can come up with lots of your own reasons for getting involved, but the important byline here is get involved. And remember, it's worth just taking these messages back sometimes to people when you're talking with them at work. It's not just about LEDs. There are lots of different things that can contribute towards increasing understanding and engagement with some of these activities. Not only in reusing materials and things like that and telling your own carbon stories, but you know, just from the London area, I mentioned earlier on Catherine McAlpine's excellent work at a very small museum, the Brunel Museum, a tiny museum, but they got out there last year with their sustainability statements, and it was actually featured on the Museums and Heritage show that year. It's a really big move for a small museum, and within that statement, the small museum, it acknowledged the legacy of the Industrial Revolution, which of course Brunel was a key part of. And what Catherine said was that they want to use the story of the Thames Tunnel to illustrate how adaptability and perseverance can help overcome the challenge of climate change today, which I think is a really positive statement to be able to take forward. Just last Sunday, another of our museums, Fulham Palace Museum, celebrated Earth Day, and they have an annual green meet. I'm afraid I couldn't go, but it sounded great. They were celebrating all things eco-friendly and sustainable, as they put it. They had talks, they had demonstrations, giving visitors a chance to browse around a green market. They had repair shops. They had eco-friendly, sustainably sourced products on sale, and I really like this idea. They had a pre-loved pavilion where people could go along to learn how to shop second-hand and obtain things to re-love, as they put it. So we know from the action plans that we saw emerging from the training, and that's a really important part of the training. It culminates in you delivering your own action plan, and you have to do that in order to get your certificate. So there is a bit of homework associated with the course, but we saw from those action plans that many of those who participated really took away a very positive attitude, both towards initiating training. As I mentioned, we had Liz Power from the London Museum of Water and Steam. She went away and is now delivering training to all her staff. We also heard about what they want to do in order to instigate behavioural change throughout their organisations, and they saw empowering their workforce as a really key way to move this forward. So there are really lots of ways that museums can make a difference. All it needs is a willingness to take action at every level within the organisation. Just to let you know, we've got some training coming up. These are our next dates. Thursday the 23rd of June and Thursday the 30th of June, that's one course. So that's, we'll operate on the same format. We'll be giving you the first module to do at home, and then we'll be delivering modules 2, 3 and 4 virtually, and then we'll be repeating that in November. You please do book and join us on this journey, because it's really important. As well as the training, we are also liaising with colleagues in the National Archives, and we're hoping to develop a programme that will really make a difference. We've been chatting to colleagues in other museum development regions of England, and we hope that we'll be able to get together a project proposal to take forward to NLHF to give a bit more support to the sector in London. And we'd also really like to promote network events for interested museums and archives over the next few months. So do keep an eye on our updates for more news on that, if you'd like to hear more. And here is our contact slide. So please do get in touch. We love to talk to people about this, and to try and get as many people involved as we can. So please do join us on this climate change journey.
Thank you very much, Lauren and Yvette. That was excellent, really interesting. Just to check, the training course that you put up, the 2 dates, is that for museums outside of the London region as well?
No, it is just for London museums, but we do operate on a waiting list basis. So quite often where we have spare places, we will take people from other areas and also other sectors. So, you know, do get in touch and if you're interested in joining us, and we're very happy to make space as best we can.
Thank you. So opening the floor up to questions, if you can just raise your hand if you've got anything you'd like to ask. I know it's the last of the talks today, so, well, I think we'll draw it to a close then, if that's everything. And on behalf of PLB and the Museum and Heritage Show, I hope you've had a great 2 days down here, and we hope to see you again next year. Thank you ever so much.